Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we have part 3 of this new series that I've been doing called High Control Horror Stories. This is where people have sent me their stories, whether that's over Reddit or in an email, and I read them and respond to them using my background as a licensed therapist, as well as my own experience in the fundamentalist church and the common themes that I see. If you have your own story that you'd like to share, please feel free to email it to me or leave it in the comments. And with that being said, let's get into a few more stories today. This first one, the writer entitled The Perfect Storm Weekend. It says, our oldest son is gay and left the church 12 years ago. I finally came to the conclusion that I just couldn't believe that God could say to our son, geez, what a shame you turned out that way. Now you'll have to be alone for the rest of your life. Yeah, I totally agree. I was talking about this recently on the podcast, how I definitely don't believe in any kind of hateful God that would hate a peaceful group of people that are expressing love. It just doesn't really make sense. I had been slowly easing out of the church for years because I was finding things that were impossible for me to believe, and it took a perfect storm of awful events over a weekend to get me to go cold turkey. One Saturday in September of 2013, my husband got a call from the ward clerk telling him that someone from the bishopric needed to talk with us. At that time, we worked in the ward library during Sunday school and priesthood/relief society meeting. I forgot to mention that this writer is Mormon, so if you're Mormon, you might recognize some of these terms. That was a wonderful church job for my atheist husband and me. It was good for him because he felt strongly that he needed to support me in church, and working in the ward library meant he wasn't teaching anyone anything. It was a good job for me because I'm chemically sensitive and we had moved into a new building a couple of years before. The church building was still making me sick, and I was rarely able to stay the entire 3 hours. I worried about the impending interview all night. Sunday, while my sweet husband was putting down the chairs, after sacrament meeting in the overflow part of the gym, I heard a couple of the ward leaders in the hallway slamming gay people. I don't remember exactly what they were saying, but it was ugly enough to upset me, and I felt bad that I wasn't brave enough to confront them about it. Because it was during class, I'm probably the only one who overheard their disturbing conversation. While I'm not sure exactly what ward leaders are, I imagine that that would be really difficult to kind of contradict anybody in any form of leadership in the church. So I just think you have to cut yourself some slack and take into consideration any of the power structures of the church. But I hear you. It sounds like that was really upsetting to hear. About 20 minutes later, the first counselor in the bishopric came into the library and asked us if it was a good time to talk. He then told us we were going to be released from the library and called to be the people in charge of cleaning the church. We would have to call people on Friday night and supervise them on Saturday morning. Immediately, I knew this call couldn't be from God, which kind of shocked me. First, dear husband and I are introverts. We don't call anyone. In fact, we rarely even call our own children. Second, I'm allergic to most cleaning chemicals, and I had just hired someone to clean our house so I could avoid being exposed to them. Wow, this is just the kind of thing that frustrates me so much. This is like what I think of as taking the Lord's name in vain. How are you going to move someone for your own convenience and then tell them that you just know that that came from God? I have definitely been hearing a lot of examples of how this kind of faith manipulation is used in the Mormon church. I'm still like learning a lot about it, but it sounds like there's some really shady things that the leaders of some of these churches will say is like coming from God. like the tithing, for example, or the mandate to avoid hot drinks and caffeine. I don't know, maybe we'll talk about that more if it comes up in someone's story. But it is so unreal how sometimes people will just blatantly try to use your faith to get you to do what they want you to do. And I'm really glad that you were able to see through that. I told him that we really couldn't accept that job and why. Even though I had known this man for 20 years and he knew I was a true believing member, he told me that if I wasn't willing to accept church jobs, I would lose my temple recommend. Temple recommend meaning. The temple recommend is a certificate that allows members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to enter the temple. Wow, so these bishops have a lot of power over, it sounds like, the access that certain Mormons have to, I imagine, these meaningful places of worship. And as you can see from this story, this has the potential to literally control the members. I was totally flabbergasted. Dear husband told him we would think about it, and the counselor left. When we got home, I was really upset. Our home teacher had an appointment to see us that night. Wait a second. Wow, some Mormons also have a home teacher that comes and through one lens, this is somebody who's checking in on the members of the community, which could be positive, but unfortunately, I also imagine the flip side of that being, a whole nother layer of control. Her home teacher had an appointment to see us that night, and he spent his entire lesson telling us how evil and depraved gay people are and how they are ruining the work of the Lord. Oh, give me a break. Again, I didn't say anything to stop him. Who knows why? I was probably stunned by that point. Well, I also want to point out that it sounds like you were in this church, in this religion for at least 20 years. Again, I'm not trying to excuse the complacency that can happen in these spaces. I just also want to highlight like all of those years of conditioning to defer to whatever the bishop and the ward leaders and the home teachers. Again, I don't totally know what all these terms mean. If you do and you want to explain it in the comments, that'd be more than welcome. But yeah, just don't leave that part out. That's a lot of conditioning to overcome. The home teacher left and I shut the front door. When I turned around, my dear husband said, "So?" I told dear husband I was done. I was done with the church. Never again was anyone going to come into my house and bash gays. Never again would someone threaten my temple recommend and eternal salvation over me telling someone why I couldn't do a church job. We met with the bishop the next Sunday to inform him of our decision, and we've never been back. I know I would have left the church in the next couple of years because I was having problems with the doctrine. This perfect storm weekend just made everything very clear to me why I shouldn't stay any longer. Well, to me, that sounds like a happy ending. You could feel that something wasn't right in this church community and you listened to that instinct. I love to hear it because these high control groups function by getting you to ignore those instincts. And then they can just kind of twist your beliefs more and more over time for whatever their selfish purposes are. One thing I've noticed in the stories I've gotten about Mormonism and just what I've been learning about it is that they have to differentiate these true believing members. And so I feel like that just really shows like the level of manipulation that there's at least the potential for in these communities. This one says, I went to a very conservative evangelical school in the 90s. For our sex talk in health class, I remember watching a Focus on the Family taped talk about the 16 or 17. Unfortunately, it cut off there, but it's the 16 to 17 steps between seeing a person to full-blown intercourse. The old 16 to 17 steps. An old man gave the talk, so in my memory it's James Dobson talking, but I'm not sure. Oh man, James Dobson would be just the guy to break sex down into 16 to 17 steps. So many of his beliefs are so rigid. It really kills me. Even then, I thought it was super creepy for an old man to be getting excited talking about the next step is hand on breast. Ugh. Yeah, the thought of watching that in high school or something makes me shudder. Actually, just the thought of watching that. To me, this little story really brings up that theme of having a kind of troubled relationship with sex. I mean, they've got it down to a 16 to 17 step process. This old James Dobson-esque man getting excited talking about talking about touching a booby. But meanwhile, sex is bad and will make God hate you. Okay. This one says, I grew up in Colorado Springs. At the Focus on the Family Welcome Center, we have a full-size Wits End. They sell hot dogs and ice cream sundaes, and mini amusement park filled with their IP. I think they mean intellectual property. I had my birthday party there multiple times. I also did some voiceover contract work for their radio commercials when I was a kid. Oh my goodness, you were in it. And devoured all of their kid magazines growing up. Seeing everything as a kid in that light made me think it was all 100% normal. I saw so many hurtful things echoed by the culture and my parents. Yeah, what you're describing is basically the way that children can get indoctrinated into these communities. And that's kind of the goal, is to make the child think that this way of life is normal and all others are wrong. From racism to purity culture to needing to trust everyone 100% who was a Christian, that got me in trouble. Oh, that is another unfortunate and disturbingly common experience. You can imagine how much abuse is able to thrive in conditions like that, where you're being taught that if they're a Christian, they're safe and you don't need to do any more critical thinking or vetting or anything. I'm sure I don't need to explain further why that mindset upsets me so much. If you've listened to my podcast, it's just so upsetting how this drive for like black or white rules replace like being able to have a nuanced perspective on something, and that hurts children. I was brought up naive, too trusting, and with no self-agency. I had a full mental breakdown at 31 in every aspect of the word. Well, just the fact that you're able to recognize these different things that impacted you. And I love that idea that those of us who've had a total breakdown are really lucky in some ways, because we get to build ourselves back up. I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you so much to everyone who sent me their stories. Like I said, if you have your own, please email it to me, or you can send it to me on any of my other social medias, which are linked below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!